know if I forget things in alphabetical order, I'll just sing the alphabet really quick. That's a mnemonic device that probably everybody learns from like day one.
Yeah, and then another one that I know a lot of people use is like the boss or like PTC and Durant Sally for like the C's and like that.
Exactly.
Or like camel with the straw in its back. For like
yeah, for chemistry.
Yeah.
Chemistry, yeah, you will probably use a lot of mnemonic devices because there's a lot of things to memorize. So, how do you practice this? How do you practice using mnemonic devices to study? So there are several different mnemonics you can come up with to remember a string of information. So the main purpose of mnemonic devices is for memorization. So memorizing, key terms, vocabulary, like a string of information, formulas, you can use mnemonic devices for that. It's not necessarily about, solidifying like concepts in your brain and like fully getting a deeper understanding of things. It's for memorization. Which is useful in a lot of classes. For example, we mentioned chemistry. There's a lot of memorization in a class like that. So, the first one, Mind Palace. I'll explain it up here. So, you are, putting yourself in a scenario where you see things, you're visualizing the things that you need to memorize, the terms, the words, the vocabulary, as part of a bigger picture, as part of a bigger scene that like plays out in your head. So you could be walking down a street and then you see things like you're passing by the vocabulary terms on the way, or maybe it comes up as a street sign, or maybe somebody's wearing a shirt that says that word on it, and maybe whoever that person may be reminds you of that word, so it makes more sense in your head. So it's pretty unique. I don't know if a lot of people jump to this mnemonic automatically. You might, try it out if you haven't before. Or you could be walking through your house and you're going to the different rooms, and each room, represents something different. So once you have that routine, it's easy to remember things that have to go in a certain order when you're doing the Mind Palace. So I'd say if you have a string of information, like steps to do something, or like a timeline of something, that's very useful to keeping things like in order. You could also do sentences, making sentences with the first letter of each idea. So, that one's pretty self-explanatory. You could sing to the melody of a song, but replace the information, or replace the lyrics with the things you need to memorize. I know, like, on YouTube, they have a lot of things like that, or your teacher might have played a video where it's, like, a song, but instead of the actual lyrics, it was, like, the information that you need for the class. So that's pretty helpful. I mean, it doesn't have to be just the lyrics, too. You could just be saying, just, like, think of the melody of a song and then say the words just to the tune of that song. Personally, I haven't tried it, but I've definitely heard some like songs with information in classes, like mostly in elementary school. But I think it's a good way to memorize it, especially if it's catchy. Because if you don't like it, if you think it's annoying, you probably won't want to remember it. So choose something that won't get annoying. And then the last one, can somebody read that?
Association. Use a color, word, name, etc. that reminds you of the term that you were trying to memorize. Like I said, with mine, HG Mercury reminds me of Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury was a hairy guy, so it goes back in like a full circle.
Exactly. So yeah, you can use a color, word, name, anything that reminds you of that thing you're trying to memorize. I'm trying to think one off the top of my head. I just keep going back to chemistry because there's so many like elements I have to memorize. But yeah, I mean, have any of you guys associated like a word with like a color, a different word, or like a name to a color or something like that to memorize before? I mean, that's fine, but that's why we're learning about this, and you guys can try it. I think it's useful for subjects that, like I said, have a lot of vocabulary or terms memorize, not necessarily like overall to master concepts. I mean, you can apply it even to math, formulas. If you associate certain like colors with certain like letters or pieces of the formula, it'll help you remember it more. Well, for me personally, when I'm thinking of like triangles and like trigonometry, I have like the three sides, like the X, the Y, and the R. In my mind, although I'm not always thinking about it, I do associate sometimes certain colors with it, with each side, so it makes it easier for me to memorize it. So instead of thinking, oh, this over that, I'm thinking, oh, this color over that. Like, instead of, oh, it's X over Y, I'm thinking, okay, like, yellow over green.
Also, like, even in like trig, we say SOHCAHTOA, which
Yeah.
makes it like a name, even though it's like that's not what it is. It's just like how it relates to like a triangle. So like
Yeah.
sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so it makes so. So like it's easier for you to memorize each group and like what it relates to.
Yeah, and like leg, we have diddles. So that's very helpful. Just think about diddling as a whole.
Yeah. So like I said, you probably
We're
use a
cutting
lot
out
of these
this
in your
part.
classes already. You probably learned them in the past. But, it's okay to think of new ones on your own. It can be really helpful, especially if you're somebody that, learns visually. Like, creating those visuals in your mind for those like terms or sets of information can really help you memorize it a lot faster. And I know some of these, they might seem cringe, and you might be like, oh, I don't want to do all that. But it does help sometimes. It really does. You just have to sit down and think about it. And then, especially when you're in a situation where you're under pressure, like taking a test, you can, like, call back to those and then remember it. I mean, I created, like, a number system for chemistry, and, like, while things might work for one person, they don't always make sense to other people, so it's a very personal thing. So you can share them. Other people might not get it because, like I said, it comes from your brain, your own visuals, your own associations. So, it might not make sense to everybody, but it's still a very useful strategy. And why would you choose to study with this method? You're more likely to remember the information if you use a way to remember that, like, clicks in your own brain. So it's good to make something up on your own instead of, like, looking something up. You can look something up if you wanted to, but I think it's especially effective if you come up with it on your own, because that's what already makes sense in your own brain.